At one point, they literally compressed my jugular and carotid. I think I wrote that in one of my blog entries, and stopped something so that I felt like I was going to black out. And they injected me with 3 drugs. They held me down, but these 2 security guards were on top of me, going like that. And I was so terrified after they shot me up with the drugs and left me alone in this room, in the emergency room, that I did not even dare cry out for help, because I was so afraid that if I got any attention at all, they would come in and finish the job. This has started 30 years ago. It started 30 years ago when they tied me up to a bed for not just 4 points, which is, there's a procedure for 4 points. Much as I disagree with 4-pointing anyone, you are supposed to have your arms by your sides with play in the restraint so that you can move, and your feet reasonably together. But they 4-pointed me so that my hands were above my heads, tied to the 4 corners of the bed, so that I was literally spread eagles for 3 days, 3 times. And this is in the 1980s at a reputable hospital in Connecticut. And they didn't remove me to go to the bathroom. I don't remember them feeding me. I don't remember them giving me water. Nobody was in the room with me at the time. They had a little window in the door, and they had a curtain over the window so that occasionally look in to see me. And I would cry out in pain because I was in so much pain from the position they kept me in. They made me sleep that way. I mean, I have, and yet, you know, the weird thing is that I did not develop clinical PTSD from that, because they told me, this is good for you. This is what you need. This is how we help you. And for some bizarre reason, I bought that story. I said, they're telling me somehow that this helps people like me. And even though every time they came after me with the goon squad, and there's nothing but a goon squad, I would scream and run and be, terrified out of my gourd. I still don't think I was traumatized by it, except in memory, in the same way as I was until Manchester Hospital in 2009, when they told me from the outset, we don't do that anymore. We don't do that anymore. Only the very worst of the worst do we ever have to restrain, and those are usually big men who are scary and are, you're just not one of them. And then they proceeded to not only seclude me in a cold, freezing cold seclusion room, but restrain me time after time after time, keep the restraints on the bed in preparation for another use, which is absolutely illegal. It's illegal to prepare to use restraints in a calm time for another uncalm time. And they kept me in restraints for 36 hours. And that was when I developed what I remember as being a traumatic experience from that. I had been traumatized before in the 2000s because down in Norwalk Hospital they'd used it really unbelievably unnecessarily, and in St. Raphael's Hospital in 2004, and all over the place. In the 2000s was the time when I began to realize something's wrong with this picture. And all along, the director of nursing at Hartford Hospital, which was a good place at the time, had told me, because she'd rescue me, or somebody would rescue me from Yukon Hospital and tell me, and get me over to Hartford Hospital, and she'd tell me, Pam, it's not you, it's the hospital. It's what they're doing to you that's the problem. You are not the problem. There's nothing about you that deserves restraints. It's their attitude, it's the way they treat people that's the problem. But I never believed that. The one thing I will say is that when at first, I think is absolutely justified. I think the problem with the diagnosis PTSD was that at first it was too closed. And they said, oh, it can't be PTSD because it's not traumatic enough. It wasn't, you didn't experience a near-death experience or a near mortality experience. And so my brother was saying, well, the actual definition of trauma is you have to be in a, like a near a, you know, a murder or an earthquake or a hurricane, and this just doesn't reach to that level. And I was trying to say, you have no idea. You have no idea. And then I have all the symptoms of PTSD. You know, I nightmares and a high racing pulse every time I even go near thoughts of that. And I would avoid even. I mean, I couldn't even think about anything to do with it without crying. I still have trouble even thinking about things to do with that. And any emotional investment in thinking about what happened without crying. You know, at one point somebody said, "Oh, you're bipolar, and you have bipolar illness." I don't believe that. I I don't believe. Sometimes I don't believe that schizophrenia really exists. That is more like a diagnosis that somebody made up to put a whole lot of people into a wastebasket. I didn't believe him when he told me. I said, that's not true. That's not me. I don't believe that. And then I have a hard time. I don't know. Sometimes I have a hard time saying yes, and sometimes I have a hard time saying no. In other words, if somebody says, um, um, it's a strange thing because on the one hand, you want your difficulties, as it were, to be taken seriously. Um, so you don't want somebody to say, well, um, there's nothing wrong, you're fine, go out and get a job as a doctor or something, which I knew I could not do. On the other hand, you don't want somebody's writing you off as a schizophrenic, which I hate that word. And then, as they have done, literally taking nothing you say seriously. I mean, everything I said at the Institute of Living was written off as grandiose, um, delusional. Um, um, I can't even think of the insulting words that they used. And some of the things that they said were grandiose and delusional, well, that she's written 2 books, that she's an artist, this sort of thing. And that's where I have a problem because I know that I have been paranoid. I know that I hear things. I know that certain experiences are real. I mean, are really my experiences. Because those experiences are real and they do matter. And they are, they're real, even if you want to call them whatever you want to label them. But on the other hand, they're not something um, that somebody should then twist and say, well, you don't matter because you have these experiences that we don't consider anything but like Looney Tunes or crazy. They're not just crazy. They're not just crazy. I have tracked from beginning to end a completely delusional, paranoid episode. I know where it started, I know what happened, and I know what ended the delusion, but nobody was listening to me while it was happening. I mean, they were listening to me, they were trying to help me, but I had to actually be, I was writing down minute by minute by minute as it happened, not because I knew what was why to do it, but because I was tracking what was happening, because I was so paranoid. But I tracked the moment it started, as it started, while it developed for an entire day as it went along, and then I tracked the second that somebody punctured the paranoia and said, wait a minute, this, and she said something that got through to me and said, oh, you're kidding. Then this can't possibly be true if that's true. And the whole thing went away. Um, it wasn't that I was well, so much as that that episode of paranoia within a grander scheme of things had been punctured. Um, and the bizarre thing was is that I was writing meticulous notes on every single thing that happened during that episode. Um, and I know that these things are both real and meaningful and not nonsense. You know, when I hear people talking to me, one thing the old doctor said to me was, they're not other people talking to you. That's you talking to you. That's your brain is making those people talk to you. That's your brain talking to you. And I still have a hard time with that. But it was an immensely good lesson because I realized that if they're telling me to set myself on fire, okay, I need somebody, and nobody's done this with me yet. And I don't know why. I don't know why, because it'd be immensely helpful if somebody would say to me, Pam, why do you hate yourself so much you want to set yourself on fire? Because that's what's going on. That's what's going on. Even if I don't know it at the time, and they're panicking because I want to do it, and I've done something close to it, and all they can think of is that we got to get her safe and all this stuff, but nobody's actually telling me or asking me the really important, salient questions about it, which would maybe crack the egg that would stop things. You know what? I don't think antipsychotics work. I think they're bogus. I think we were sold a load of crap when we were told they were even antipsychotic. I think that they were always behavioral modification drugs. And when the Thorazines and Haldols were out, they knew that then, and they know it now, but they've bought a load of crap. And they've sold us a load of crap. And I was sold it a long time ago, and I no longer believe it. The only reason I take Abilify and Geodon now is because I believe that they facilitate my writing and artwork. If they didn't, there's no reason I take them, since they do nothing for me. I think most people won't do therapy because it takes too long, they can't be bothered, and the insurance won't pay for it. I think talking would help a lot of people. Education changes your brain. It's the best way to change your brain possible. Why wouldn't it help a mental illness, if there is such a thing? There is such a thing as mental aberrations. There is such a thing. I know, I've experienced them. But the thing is, but if anything can change your brain, why can't education, which is talking and thinking and exercising your brain with another person to think in another way, why couldn't that help more than these drugs that do nothing but up your dopamine and down your dopamine and change your dopamine, which isn't the problem to begin with? They've never proven that the dopamine hypothesis is anything but a load of crap. It is a load of crap. There's nothing wrong with my dopamine except that it's been played around with by too many doctors.